The hutch was the first thing I noticed. Not the sharp chemical smell of cleaning products hanging in the air, not the hallway table pushed 2 feet to the right from where we'd kept it for 3 years, not the ceramic bowl on the sideboard that I did not recognize and had definitely not bought. The hutch, the dining room hutch, the one we'd found at an estate sale in Fergus, and spent an entire August weekend sanding down together, the one with the glass-fronted doors and the cream-colored shelves. The one that had held my grandmother's china every single day since we'd moved in. The shelves were empty. I could see the ring marks from where I stood in the doorway, faint circles pressed into the cream, 12 pairs of them where the plates and the saucers had always sat, and not a single dish behind the glass. I didn't move for a long time. I still had my work bag on my shoulder. My coat was half unzipped. I had been standing in a parking garage in Waterloo 45 minutes ago, thinking about what to make for dinner. And now I was standing in my own front hallway, looking at empty shelves where my grandmother's china was supposed to be. My name is Margot. I'm 34 years old. I've been a project coordinator at an architecture firm in Waterloo for 6 years, which means I manage timelines and budgets and the kind of carefully maintained composure that keeps a room full of contractors and clients from turning into something expensive. I drive 40 minutes each way, and I've learned to leave the work at the door because if I don't, the evenings disappear. I'm not someone who is easily shaken. I grew up the only girl between 3 brothers in a house where you were expected to solve your own problems and report back only with the results. I stood in that doorway and felt something go still inside me that had nothing to do with calm. To understand what came next, you have to understand the china first, not as a plot point, as a person. My grandmother Eileen came to Canada from County Cork in 1963 with 2 suitcases and carefully wrapped in her winter coat a set of Royal Albert china in the old country roses pattern. 12 full-place settings, the teapot with the curved spout, the sugar bowl, the creamer, the oval serving platter with the cabbage roses painted around the rim. She told me once that she had saved for it for 3 years before she left because she wanted something beautiful to take with her. Something that would make wherever she ended up feel like a home that expected good things from itself. She used it for every Christmas dinner I can remember, every Easter, every birthday that happened at her table in Brampton. When I was small, I was allowed to hold the teacups carefully, both hands, and she would tell me about County Cork the way you tell a child a story. Vividly, without worrying too much about what they could actually comprehend. I comprehended enough. I comprehended that the roses on the cups were the same red as her kitchen curtains and that the gold rim was worn thin on one of the teacups, because she always gave herself that one, the imperfect one, because she said a cup that had been used was more beautiful than one that hadn't. She died in the fall of 2019. She left the china to me specifically, not to my mother or my aunt, or to be divided equitably. To me, in writing, and when I asked my mother why, she said, "You're the only one who ever asked her to tell you about it." I kept it in the hutch behind the glass doors. I used it for Christmas dinner and for my husband Reid's birthday, and occasionally on a difficult Tuesday, just because I wanted to eat dinner off something beautiful. And I was allowed to want that. Reid and I met 7 years ago at a birthday party in Hamilton, the kind of party where you don't know most of the people there, and you end up on someone's back porch for 3 hours because it's easier than going back inside. He is funny and quiet in the way of people who listen more than they speak, and he makes an exceptional chicken tikka masala from scratch. We got married in 2020, small ceremony, his family and mine, and we moved to our semi-detached in Guelph not long after. He works from home as a software developer, which means he is in the house most days, which has been largely a good thing. His mother, Beverley, had been widowed 4 years before we married when Reid's father, Harold, passed away after complications following hip surgery. Beverley was 68, retired from a long career in school administration in Brantford, and she had a full life by her own description. Her church women's auxiliary, her Thursday bridge club, a daughter in Vancouver, and Reid 40 minutes away in Guelph. She was not a cruel woman. She was warm in her own way, and she expressed that warmth in what I came to understand was her primary mode. Through management, she managed things, her home, her calendar, and the lives of the people around her, insofar as they would allow. She would look at any space she entered and see immediately what she would do differently, and she was not always wrong, which in some ways made it more complicated. She and I had a functional arrangement in the early years. She came for dinners, approved of the house, complimented the food. She reorganized the spice cabinet the very first time she came over. Just quietly, while Reid and I were talking in the living room, and I found it differently ordered when I went to start dinner. I put it back the way it was the next morning and said nothing. She suggested the couch would look better against the other wall, and then arranged to have it moved on an afternoon when we were both at work, and I came home to a rearranged living room and a post-it on the counter that said, "What do you think?" "Love, Bev." I moved it back. I said it was fine. Reid gave her a key about 2 years into our marriage. For emergencies, he said, and he meant it exactly that way. She interpreted the word with some flexibility. She used the key when Reid had a contractor coming and couldn't be there, which was fair. She used it to bring in the mail during a week we were in Nova Scotia, which was thoughtful. She used it on a Saturday in October when Reid and I were at a wedding in Niagara-on-the-Lake, and she decided, without calling, that the front garden needed the hostas cut back before winter. I came home to tidy garden beds and a note that said, "Sorted. Love, Bev." I said it was fine. I have kept a note on my phone since the summer before everything came apart. Not because I planned to use it in any formal sense, because I needed to know that what I was experiencing was real, that I wasn't cataloging small inconveniences and constructing something out of nothing. There were 26 unannounced visits in 16 months. See, the guest bathroom hand towels replaced in November because she found a set at HomeSense she liked better. The old ones folded neatly in the hall closet, as if that made it a gift rather than a decision made without me. The pantry reorganized in January, the cereal and baking supplies in different places than they'd been for 3 years. A plant on the kitchen windowsill moved outside in February because she thought it looked crowded, and the plant froze within a week. I mentioned 3 of the 26 to Reid. Each time, he said he'd talk to her. Each time, things were quiet for a few weeks, and then weren't. None of that is the point. The point is Thursday in March. It was one of those gray Ontario Marches where the snow is finished, but the cold isn't, and the sky has that dingy, exhausted look that makes 5 o'clock feel like 8. I had been in the office since 7:30 dealing with a contractor dispute on a project in Cambridge, the kind of problem that requires patient documentation, professionally worded emails, and the contained management of your own frustration, and I left at 5:15 feeling scraped thin. I texted Reid at 4 to start water for pasta. He texted back, "Sure." One word. I stopped at the co-op on the way home for milk and drove the last 10 minutes thinking about nothing in particular. I parked in the driveway. Beverly's silver Civic wasn't there. I walked up the front path, unlocked the door, stepped inside, and looked up at the hutch. Empty shelves, the ring marks, nothing. I set my bag down carefully. I walked to the hutch and opened both glass doors and looked at the cream-colored shelves for a long moment, and then I closed them again. I heard Reid's desk chair roll across the floor upstairs. "Margot? Hey, you're home," his footsteps on the stairs. "How was the?" He appeared at the bottom of the staircase. He took one look at my face and stopped moving. "Where is my grandmother's china?" I said. The silence lasted 3 seconds. In 5 years of marriage, I'd learned to read Reid's silences the way you learn to read weather in a place you've lived long enough. This one was the silence of a person who already knows what they're about to have to say. "Mom came by this afternoon," he said. "She wanted to do a little refresh in the dining room, the buffet runner she'd found. She said the hutch was looking cluttered and she thought, 'Where is the china, Reid?' She gave it to Dorothy." He stopped. He looked at the hutch and then at me, her friend from the auxiliary. "She said Dorothy had always admired it, and it was just sitting there, not being used, and—" "I used it at Christmas," I said. "I used it for your birthday dinner. I used it on a Tuesday in February, because I wanted to eat dinner off a beautiful plate, and I was entitled to do that. It was not just sitting there." The front hall was very quiet. Outside, the neighbor's dog barked once and went still. "I was on a call," Reid said. He said it the way you say something you already know won't hold up. "I know," I said. "For how long?" "Most of the afternoon. But I knew she was here. He stopped. I assumed it would be fine." I sat down on the bench by the door. I thought about Dorothy, a woman I had met exactly twice at family gatherings, warm and floral bloused, who brought date squares to the auxiliary meetings and volunteered at the hospital on Thursdays. Dorothy, who was somewhere in Brantford right now with my grandmother's china in a box in her crotch, who had no way of knowing that those dishes had been carried across an ocean by a woman from Cork who had saved 3 years of her wages to buy them. "Give me Dorothy's number," I said. I called her from the hallway. She picked up on the second ring, and when I told her who I was, there was a brief pause and then the sound of someone realizing they are standing in the middle of someone else's grief through no fault of their own. "Oh, sweetheart," Dorothy said. "Oh, Bev said it had been cleared. I would never have. It's in my garage. I haven't even opened the box yet. Please come and get it, whenever you need." "Tomorrow after work," I said. "Thank you, Dorothy." "Of course," she said. "Of course, I'm so sorry." I thanked her and hung up. Then I called Beverley. She answered right away. "Margot, hi, I was just going to." "The china is with Dorothy," I said. "I've spoken with her. I'm picking it up tomorrow evening. I'd like to talk with you about what happened today." The pause that followed was different from Reid's. More controlled. Beverley had decades of composure behind her, and she knew how to use it. "I was only trying to help," she said. "The hutch had been looking cluttered for months, and the buffet runner I found at HomeSense was perfect, and I thought a little." "Beverley." I said her name the way I'd learned to say things when I needed them actually heard. "Before you explain, I need you to listen to me." She listened. "That china was carried from Ireland to Canada in 1963 by my grandmother," I said. "She saved 3 years to buy it because she wanted something beautiful to take with her to a new country. She used it for 60 years of important meals. She left it to me specifically when she died because of the relationship we had. Not to my mother, not to my aunt, to me. It is the most important thing in our house. And it left today without my knowledge, while my husband was upstairs on a call and the front door was unlocked because you have a key." I paused. The words had been forming long enough that they came without hesitation. "You have used that key 26 times in the past year and a half. I have the dates. I know about the hand towels in November, the pantry in January, the plant you moved outside in February." I have let every single one of those things go because I didn't want to make things harder for you, or for Reid, or for the family. I have been very good at letting things go. But today is different. Today something left this house that my grandmother carried on a boat from Cork in 1963, and it cannot be replaced. And I need you to understand that. Not as an explanation for what happened. As the thing you carry going forward. The silence this time was longer. I didn't realize, she started. I know you didn't, I said. That is what I needed to tell you. I went upstairs. Reid was sitting on the edge of our bed with his hands on his knees, not on his phone, not doing anything, just sitting with it. I heard some of it, he said. I sat down in the desk chair across the room. The March dark had come all the way in now, the sky outside the window, the deep, flat blue of a winter evening that isn't finished being winter. I should have said something a long time ago, I said. About all of it, not just tonight. I should have noticed, he said. I've been telling myself that each time you mentioned something, I handled it. But I wasn't handling it. I was smoothing it over until the next time. He looked at his hands. That's not the same thing. No, I said, it isn't. He looked up. What do you need from me right now? I thought about that. It was a good question, asked the right way. I need you to talk to her, I said, not to make her feel better about what happened, to be clear with her about what has to change. The key, the unannounced visits. The idea that this house is hers to manage when she decides it needs managing. I paused. And I need you to understand something too. When you know she's coming over and you don't tell me, when you assume it'll be fine, that's a decision you're making about my home without me. He was quiet for a moment. Then, you're right. She's lonely, I said. I know that. I've known that since Harold died, and I have tried to make room for it. But lonely isn't a reason, it's an explanation. She needs more in her life than just us, he said. She does. And that's not our fault, and it's not our problem to fix, but it can't keep becoming our problem by default. He nodded slowly. I'll talk to her. A real conversation. I'll tell her about the key and about the bigger pattern, all of it. Okay, I said, and I believed him, which mattered. I drove to Brantford after work the next evening. Dorothy met me in her driveway with the box already in her arms. She handed it over without making me come inside, which was its own kind of grace. I'm truly sorry, she said, if I had known. You didn't know, I told her. That wasn't yours to know. I drove home on the 401 with the box on the passenger seat. I turned the radio off and drove in the dark and thought about my grandmother at her kitchen table in Brampton on Sunday afternoons, the light through her lace curtains, the kettle already on. I think she would have been angry, a quiet, final, Irish kind of angry. And then she would have gone and gotten the china back because she was practical that way. She did not carry things across an ocean to leave them in someone else's garage. I did not leave them in someone else's garage. Reid had made dinner when I got home. Chicken tikka masala, the from-scratch version that takes 90 minutes. He had set the table with the Royal Albert china, washed and dried and placed carefully, the rose-printed cups and the gold-rimmed plates, cloth napkins folded at each place. He had unpacked the box himself. I put my coat away and stood in the doorway of the dining room, and did not say anything for a moment. She's coming Saturday, Reid said from the kitchen. I talked to her last night, for a long time. She's going to apologize. A real one. I was clear about what that means. He came to the doorway, and she's giving the key back. Not gone forever, but reset. She calls ahead. She asks. Same as anyone else who isn't on the mortgage. I sat down. He brought the bowls. She cried, he said. Not as a defense, as information. I let her cry, and then I told her that her loneliness wasn't something I could manage by letting her fill it with our house. that if she wanted to be here in a way that actually worked, she had to understand that this was your home too, not you're tolerated in it, but yours. He paused, and I told her about the grief group at the community center in Brantford. His cousin had mentioned it months ago. I was firmer about it this time. I looked at him across the table. The gold rims caught the kitchen light. That last part mattered, I said. I know, he said. I should have said it sooner. We ate dinner from my grandmother's plates, and it was quiet in a way that wasn't uncomfortable. The kind of quiet that settles in when something overdue has finally been said and the air in the room is different for it. Beverley came on Saturday afternoon. She sat at the kitchen table with her hands folded, and she apologized without the cushioning that apologies sometimes carry. No, I was only trying to. No, you have to understand my intentions. She said she hadn't considered what the china meant, and that not considering it had been a pattern longer than one afternoon, and that she recognized it now. She said losing Harold had made her feel, for 4 years, like she needed to be needed by someone, and that somewhere in those 4 years useful had become something that didn't leave room for whether the someone wanted it. She said she was going to call the community center about the grief group that week. Not think about it, call. She did not hug me when she left. I think she understood that we weren't there yet, and that reaching past it would have been its own small dishonesty. She hugged Reid at the door and then turned to look at me from the hallway. "The china is beautiful, Margot," she said quietly. "I can see now why it matters," and I said, "Thank you, Beverley," and I meant the acknowledgement in it. That something had finally been seen. She didn't speak to me directly for about 2 weeks after that. It was uncomfortable in the way that honest things sometimes are, and then it wasn't. When she finally called, she called me, not Reid, and she led with, "I've been to 2 sessions now. There's a woman named Gail there whose husband also died too young, and she has very strong opinions about date squares that I find I both agree and disagree with." I laughed, and she laughed, and it was the easiest conversation we had ever had. The china is back in the hutch. The teacup with the worn gold rim and the small chip is in its place. The key is on a hook by our front door for when it is genuinely needed. Beverley comes to Sunday dinners when we invite her, and she brings dessert and she sits where there is room. I deleted the note on my phone, not because things are seamless. They aren't. Family doesn't work like that. And anyone who tells you that one hard conversation repairs years of accumulated silence is selling you something. I deleted it because I stopped needing to keep count. I had been counting to prove to myself that what I was feeling was real, that it was reasonable to want my own home to feel like mine. I don't need to prove that anymore. My grandmother crossed an Atlantic with a set of dishes because she believed a beautiful table told the people sitting at it that they mattered. That wherever you were, however far from where you'd started, you didn't have to make do. That the space you occupied was worth setting properly. The hutch is mine, the china is mine, the house is mine, and everyone who comes through the door understands that now, not because I said it loudly, but because I finally said it at all.